A new trading week has kicked off here on Wall Street. Today I'm joined on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange by Peter Cardillo of First Standard Financial, and he'll tell us what to expect this week. Peter, great to have you here today.
Good to be back.
Well, we have a lot on tap, including central bank meetings, as well as the G20 at the end of this week. Now, we also have plenty of event risk in terms of Europe with the Dutch elections coming up, as well as some of the U.S.-German meetings. So what do you think is the most important for the equity markets?
I think it's the Fed, there's no question about that. And there's no doubt that the markets have already placed in a rate hike on Wednesday. But I kind of think, what's really going to be important this time is to try to assess what the Fed is really going to say in its communique. And the question is, will we have a more aggressive Fed or lesser aggressive rate hikes on our hands in the coming months? And I suspect that, all things being equal, that there's a good possibility that the Fed may have to raise more than 3 times this year. And that's based on 2 factors. One, the present economic conditions, and also if the Trump economic plan goes into effect, and that is obviously lower tax rates. If that would happen, then the Fed is going to have to defend, the economy in terms of inflation, and so there's a good possibility that we could be faced with 4 rate hikes, possibly even 5.
And speaking of rate hikes, we got the ECB meeting last week. Now, on the heels of that, we saw the dollar trade lower against the euro, and in today's session, we're seeing flat trading. But of course, all eyes are on the Dutch elections that are taking place this week. So in terms of the Eurozone, what is your outlook going forward?
Well, in terms of economic activity, there's no question that they're doing much better than they have been. And, of course, a lot depends on the political situation in Europe. And as you mentioned, the upcoming Dutch elections. But the real key are the French elections. And, right now there seems to be a toss-up in terms of Le Pen and her opponents. I suspect that if she should make some inroads going into the elections, then, we could see the euro come under attack, and that obviously would mean a stronger dollar, and that would mean probably, the price of gold shooting up again.
And while we're talking about the currencies, today the British pound is well supported against the US dollar. Now, Article 50 could be triggered as early as sometime this week, and that would mean that formal Brexit talks will begin. But it does also appear that Scotland is back in the spotlight today as the National Party leader plans to apply for a fresh referendum. So what's going on there?
Well, obviously, that just creates another avenue of uncertainties within Europe, and so basically, with Scotland knocking on the door again, this is nothing new. It's happened in the past, and eventually, perhaps maybe they will succeed in having a referendum, and a referendum that will, mean the exit of Scotland out of Great Britain. And of course, if that happens, while it would not necessarily be a negative effect perhaps for the euro, but it certainly could be a negative effect for the British pound.
And last but not least, from the G20 meeting, do you expect anything?
No, not really. I don't expect very much. Generally the G20 have an agenda, but their agenda seems to be less effective than perhaps, an individual country.
Okay, Peter, well, thank you for joining me on this Monday. Here in New York, we have a snowstorm coming, so we'll talk about that as well as all that happens in terms of global events next week. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.